This spreadsheet is both simple and effective in allowing you to understand what you need for a house deposit. It's time to get clarity on understanding the amount of money you need to make a property purchase. Whether you're looking to buy your own home or an investment property, the calculator we're going to run through today, you can crunch these numbers yourself and you're going to be able to understand whether you need a 5, 10 or 20% deposit and how you can calculate your own numbers for your own situation when it comes to making a property purchase. Now, my name's Luke and I run a Brisbane-based buyers agency called Purpose Property. Head over to purposeproperty.com.au if you're looking for a Brisbane-based buyers agent. Otherwise, I have a background in accounting and I'm a chartered accountant by trade. And so I've put together a little spreadsheet today where you can see how you calculate the numbers on a deposit for your first home or an investment property. We're going to go through several scenarios and look at how you could potentially put the least money down on a deal, or if you want to put more money down, how you can actually maximize your equity and reduce some of the expenses like lender's mortgage insurance. Now, calculating the numbers you need for a property purchase is not rocket science, so let's break this down in a simple and straightforward manner so you can calculate the numbers on your next potential purchase. So the way I like to lay out my spreadsheets is with some base information at the start and then the numbers to follow, so I can track all of our deals in all of our spreadsheets for our clients and for our own property portfolio. So at the top of my spreadsheet, I like to put in the property details and history. So I like to put in the address, the land size, bedrooms, bathrooms, car spaces, taxable land value, which I will show you how you can actually find that number, and then also whether the property is flood prone or not. Now, when it comes to whether a property is flood prone or not, look at your local government area or your local city council and look for their flood maps to give you an indication of whether the property might have issues or not. You can see on screen here, we're looking at 1 Smith Street. The land size is 625 square meters. It's 3 bed, 1 bath, 1 car. And the example taxable land value is $450,000 and the property is not flood prone, which is important for me as an investor. Now, if you want to find the annual land tax valuation for your property that you're looking at, all you need to do is jump into Google and type annual land tax valuation. Even if you misspell it, you can just click here for the 2022 land valuations in Queensland. Then click here, find your land valuation, and then type in your address. So just in this example, I've just picked a random address. Now, this is not the exact same, but here you can see 1 Smith Street in Berthmagary East is on 605 square meters with a land value of $255,000 with a valuation date of the 1st of the 10th, 2021. This is a great bit of kit to do some research as you're understanding properties and potential purchases, because understanding the land value gives you an indication of what you might need to pay in land tax down the track, and also allows you to compare to other properties you're looking at as a basis point as to what the state government says the land value is between 1 Smith Street and 1 Jane Street, for example. So use that to your advantage. So let's get back to the numbers. Now we understand a little bit about the property and we've documented it. Let's look at the funding costs. So I've got 3 scenarios here. I've got a 5% deposit, a 10% deposit, and a 20% deposit. Now, it's not as simple as just going 5% times the purchase price. There's a few more numbers, as you'll see, in terms of additional costs. In this hypothetical scenario where you're buying a $700,000 house on 625 square meters, at a 5% deposit, you'll need $35,000 in terms of cash or equity, which is cash coming from the bank from new debt. And in these 3 situations, you'd need $35K, $70K, or $140,000 to either have a 5, 10%, or 20% deposit in these situations. Now, generally, Emily and I are always looking to use a 20% deposit because you see these little indicators above. Now, this says in general, as a rule of thumb, when you use a 5% deposit, you end up paying a 5% premium for LMI based on the purchase price. For a 10% deposit, you're going to end up paying a 2.5% premium on the purchase price. And with a 20% deposit, you don't need to pay LMI. Now, this is a great rule of thumb if you need to quickly calculate or estimate what your lender's mortgage insurance will be. All lender's mortgage insurance is insuring the bank if you default. And so if you have a deposit less than 20%, you're likely going to need to pay LMI unless you're a specific type of professional, like a doctor or a lawyer or an accountant, and they're going to waive that for you, which would be pretty nice if you ask me. Now we've got our three deposit ranges, 5, 10, and 20%. Let's look at the additional costs involved with making a property purchase. This is where a lot of people go wrong and they miss these numbers down the left-hand side. Now the first thing I have on this list is the pre-purchase inspections and a building and pest discount. Now one of the key things to know here is that building and pests will typically cost somewhere between $500 and $800 depending on the size of the property and how invasive the inspections are. Typically you want to be able to have a builder and a pest inspector separately check over the property to give you assurance that there's no major issues. Now you can negotiate on minor issues. Everything is negotiable when it comes to a property purchase. So in this example scenario, we're looking at say a $3,000 discount. That could be for damage in the bathroom or some mold in some of the ceilings, or a window was cracked or a shower screen was cracked. So when it comes to a building and pest, try and negotiate based on the report you receive from the builder and the pest inspector to get a little bit more money, or a reimbursement at settlement is the way I like to phrase it. So this will be $3,000 back to us as the buyer as a reimbursement at settlement for those minor issues that we negotiated on. The next thing you need to pay for, and everyone typically needs to pay for, is a solicitor's fee. So you're going to generally pay somewhere between $1,000 to $3,000 here. It depends on the type of service. There's a lot of big companies out there which just churn and burn, which is fine for a general purchase in terms of the solicitor's work or the conveyancing work. But if you want a hands-on approach and a one-to-one interaction, you're going to generally need to pay more money for that. So if you want a highly qualified solicitor with a small, tight-knit team, you might need to pay $2,500 or $3,000 for their services. So depending on your situation, you go for more of the big churn and burn, the cheaper option, or you'll go for more of the expensive option if you need a bit more due diligence and a bit more a hands-on approach. The next thing you need to pay for is stamp duty. Generally, stamp duty is not going to be covered by your lender. Now, I've got a little calculation in here, which you can see up the top, this big string of text, which basically maps out based on the purchase price what the stamp duty will cost. But again, you can just jump onto Google and type in stamp duty calculator Queensland. And the Queensland government is going to give you an estimate of a stamp duty calculation. So let's just do the calculator quickly to show you my calculations in my spreadsheet are working. So let's say we're looking at another type of property and the purchase price is $700,000. Click calculate and it says the estimated transfer duty payable is $24,525. So jumping back to the spreadsheet here on screen, you can see that my calculation is also showing $24,525 for a $700,000 property. The next expense is a commitment fee, which you could use as a miscellaneous expense. Sometimes your lender will require you to pay these fees. Sometimes they'll be waived. Then we've got lender's mortgage insurance. So this is the estimate that we spoke about earlier. LMI is 5% of the purchase price as an estimate. Again, you can go to Google and use some LMI calculations because it's going to be different for different numbers. But just as a rule of thumb, you could be looking at $35,000 for a 5% deposit. And in the 10% deposit scenario, you could be looking at 2.5% to 3% of the purchase price for lender's mortgage insurance. The reason is when you get from 10% to 5%, the debt is significantly higher and there's more risk on the lender. So that's why it's a lot higher for you to get that insurance. It jumps significantly, it doubles almost to around that $35,000 mark in this example, where you're going to need to cover the lender and their risk. The final bits and pieces in terms of expenses here are lenders outlays, insurance, and rego and mortgage fees. Now these are generally going to be standard expenses. Some might be waived, some might not. You typically need to provide a certificate of currency to your lender. That's why I've put in $1,000 there for insurance. I again tend to keep my excess high and minimize my premiums by paying annually. And so that's an option if you want to reduce the insurance costs. And then these other fees depend on the situation. So it's good to have these options here and have a bit of buffer there as well. So let's wrap this all up. So the total additional costs in the 5% scenario are $62,271, $44,771 when you're making a 10% deposit, and $27,271 when you've got a 20% deposit. Now the really interesting thing is the total cash required in each of these situations. So the total cash required in scenario 1 is $97,000. Scenario 2 is 114, and scenario 3 is 167. The funny thing is the difference in equity in each of these situations. So you might go for a 5% deposit, but you're spending a lot of money on those additional costs. Whereas if you could get to a 10% deposit, you could only put in an extra 17.5 grand and have another 5% stake in that property. Going all the way up to a 20% deposit, you'll need an additional 52,000 or an additional 70,000 from the 5% deposit to take you to a 20% deposit for a $700,000 property. And so you're going to need $167K for a $700,000 place with $140,000 down and $27,000 to close the deal. This, as a general rule of thumb for closing costs when you've got a 20% deposit, is somewhere between 4 to 6%. You can see in this scenario, it's 4%. It depends on whether you have other expenses like a buyer's agent or additional searches done on the property, or some of these costs are higher for yourself. So use this calculator to help you calculate your own numbers on a deal. Now, I've heard of a lot of people breaking into the property market with these super low deposits at around that 5% mark. But a lot of people know, and if you don't know, the sweet spot for lenders' mortgage insurance is around that 10 to 12% mark. Typically, it's about 12% of a deposit in terms of the purchase price to get the maximum value of the lender's mortgage insurance. Emily and I actually bought our first property with less than a 20% deposit, but we were able to house hack, which means we had the other bedrooms rented out in the house, and that really helped us pay down the mortgage quickly. When it came to our subsequent purchases, we actually used a 20% deposit because we wanted to avoid lenders' mortgage insurance, and we've continued to grow our property portfolio with 20 and even 30% deposits for our most recent property purchase. So if you're looking to calculate the numbers for your next property purchase, look at what we've shown in today's video, calculate the numbers yourself, and work out what deposit will work best for you. If I could do it all again and start from my property portfolio from day one, I'd probably look at that 10 to 12% mark for deposits. And as the property portfolio had grown and reached our maximum potential, that's when I would look to start paying down the debt. Rather than using 20% deposits, I would keep as much of my cash dry as possible, only put the minimum down to get the maximum value, and then keep the remaining cash in offset accounts to be used for renovations or to be used for future property purchases to continue to grow the property portfolio. Then obviously after that, you're looking to consolidate and start to pay down some debt and increase the cash flow so you can live off that portfolio. You don't want to be growing forever. Now, if you want to understand how you can actually pay for a property without using any of your own cash, check out this video on how to use equity to buy a property. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one. Peace.